Well, Canada's leaders are apparently rethinking their ties to the United States.
8 decades. This is a moment for all of us to continue to stand together and as friends and partners.
Canada and NATO just threw a huge bombshell at the U.S., reigniting tensions over old tariff disputes from Trump's days. It seems Trump underestimated Canada, thinking they'd hesitate to retaliate given their quieter stance on global politics. But guess what? Canada isn't playing the timid neighbor anymore. This trade crisis is set to show they mean business, and they're not afraid to stand their ground.
Tariff wars are nobody wins.
Now, if you're from America, I feel for you because your leaders' decisions are making waves. And here's the splashdown.
Has signed tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico and China, America's top trading partners.
President Donald Trump has decided to go tariff Wild West on imports from not just anywhere, but from our good neighbors like Canada, plus Mexico and China.
5% tariff is imposed on Canadian goods.
Yes, you heard it right. A 25% tariff on Canadian goods and a 10% tax on their oil exports, not to mention the heavy hits to other major trading buddies. Trump claims it's all to stop undocumented immigrants and fentanyl at the border. But really, it sparked a firestorm up north.
Well, Canadian officials are decrying the Trump administration's move in statements online. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford said that the tariffs will, quote, hurt America, writing that Canada now has no choice but to hit back and hit back.
Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, is pretty much gearing up for a trade war, warning that Canada won't just sit back. They're planning to hit back hard. Despite heads up from the Canadians about how badly this could go, the Trump administration plowed ahead, seriously underestimating Canada's backbone.
It's actually the first trading partner now of the United States for almost 2 years in a row. This is, in soccer terms, it's an own goal, but if you want it in American parlance, it's a self-inflicted wound because these countries, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, these supply chains that have become so integrated, vertebrated.
Now, the U.S. might have to pay a steep price as it deals with the backlash from not just Canada, but other global powerhouses too. And Canada? They're not just throwing punches, they're playing chess. They're cozying up with NATO and the EU, positioning themselves as the new go-to guys for energy and tech, especially electric vehicles and renewables.
So there's no reason that the two of us should get into a tariff war.
This isn't just about fighting tariffs. It's Canada stepping up to maybe push the US off its pedestal in key markets. With deals like CETA, which gives them a smooth path into European markets, Canada is setting itself up as a charming alternative to the US.
Militarization in Europe. The alliance NATO has members close to Russia. NATO's core principle is all for one and one for all, but will America honor this?
By building bridges with NATO and the EU, Canada isn't just defending its turf. They're eyeing a chance to redraw the global trade map, potentially shaking up US influence in these regions. It's a clever play, turning a defensive move into a chance to lead on the world stage, reshaping how global trade winds might blow in the future. So, hang tight because the international trade scene might just get a new leader on the board.
What might America do next? This week also matters because it's not just about policy, it's a deep fracture. In a speech to Europe's military elite, US Vice President J.D. Vance took aim, condemning the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values.
The trade winds are definitely blowing in a new direction, and it's all about Canada and the EU doing more than just exchanging maple syrup and cheese. Since they kicked off CETA in 2017, trade's been booming, like a 25% increase in EU imports from Canada. Yep, that's a lot of Canadian goods flowing into Europe, and it's making the US a bit of an odd man out. The stats are telling a tough story. US exports to the EU dipped by 10% post-CETA. It looks like Europe's got a new favorite. This isn't just about selling more stuff, though. For US businesses that used to count on European markets, this shift could be a real game changer.
US and EU, so we play quite an important and interesting role between the two big trade blocs, and I think the government and
European buyers are now swinging towards Canadian products, which enjoy smoother trade routes and sweeter deals under CETA. If this keeps up, American companies might just find themselves watching from the sidelines, especially in big deal sectors like tech and pharma.
That we've been allies for hundreds of years. We fought and died side by side on world conflicts and wars. We're $1.3 trillion in two-way trade. We're each other's number one trading partner by far.
And let's talk about energy. Canada's making moves here too. While still one of the big oil players, Canada is now zooming into the electric vehicle, EV, scene. They're all mining lithium and cobalt, which are like gold for EV batteries, aiming to be the go-to supplier in the green economy. Plus, they're not stopping at oil and EVs.
These are politicians making these kind of comments, and also they understand that President Trump is very mercurial, and sometimes it's his effective way of negotiating, and we understand that, but still some people are a little bit hurt by some of his comments.
Canada's also cranking up its uranium and liquefied natural gas, LNG, game, fueling Europe's shift towards more nuclear and low-carbon power options. With projects like the LNG Canada facility set to start exports by 2025, Canada's not just playing in the energy market, they're looking to dominate it.
Well, I think it's hard for either Canada or Mexico not to respond in kind with some form of countervailing duties. I think that a generalized countervailing duty or tariff from Mexico.
As Canada steps up as a top-tier energy supplier, they're shaking up more than just the North American market. This move could tilt global energy security and trade dynamics, especially with the world hustling to tackle climate change. It's a bold play that might just redraw the global energy map, putting Canada in the driver's seat.
Countervailing duties will be levied on the U.S. The big question mark here, obviously, is whether this is a negotiating tactic. There are some, included yours truly, that believe that some of this is to force an early renegotiation.
All these shifts in trade and energy are painting a picture of a new era in global economic power. The U.S. has some thinking to do if it wants to keep up, let alone lead. Whether it's hammering out new trade deals, tweaking energy policies, or revamping industrial strategies, the U.S. response to these challenges could very well shape the new landscape of international trade and economic diplomacy.
That these tariffs, if they remain in place for over a month or so, will start costing each U.S. household $830 in extra taxes.
And believe me, this tariff war that the U.S. kicked off has really opened up a can of worms for everyone, especially American wallets. Get this, U.S. households are now shelling out an extra $830 a year because of these tariffs. That's right. Thanks to higher prices on everything from toys to toasters, as businesses pass on the cost of pricier imported goods.
Well, the problem is that if you look at the numbers in terms of immigration flows on the US-Mexico border, they've been the lowest even since when Donald Trump was in the White House in the first time around.
And it's not just a hit to the pocketbook at the checkout line. These tariffs are messing with the whole supply chain soup to nuts, particularly hitting the automotive and tech sectors hard. For example, those tariffs on imported aluminum and steel, they've cranked up production costs big time, leading to your new car costing about 2% more. That might not sound like much, but it adds up fast when you're talking about a $30,000 ride. The American Automotive Policy Council isn't pulling punches with the data here. They're saying it's a direct hit from the tariffs.
But I think we have to appeal to Donald Trump's business acumen. I think is the real opportunity. Tariff wars are nobody wins.
And let's not forget the bigger picture. Historically, tariff wars tend to do more harm than good, like kicking off a nasty cycle of retaliation that chokes global trade. Remember the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act back in 1930? It jacked up tariffs so high that it smothered international trade and threw gasoline on the dumpster fire that was the Great Depression.
Well, Canada's leaders are apparently rethinking their ties to the United States.
Experts are waving red flags left and right. Take former Mexican ambassador Arturo Sarakin. He's calling these tariffs a series of self-inflicted wounds. According to him, it's not just about higher prices. It's about fraying the very trade relationships and supply chains that keep the U.S. economy humming along.
Drives a wedge between Canada and the U.S. with a trade war. Could we join the EU?
But here's a plot twist. Across the pond, the UK's singing a slightly different tune. Despite all the tariff drama, Chris Southworth from the International Chamber of Commerce in the UK talks up the excellent state of UK-US trade ties. They're still buddy-buddy in areas like services and fintech, despite the storm clouds.
For all of us to continue to stand together and as friends and partners, that's exactly what we will always do. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
The UK isn't just sitting pretty though. They're playing a smart game, keeping strong ties with the US, while also mingling with the EU and other big players to dodge any fallout from US trade policy.
In a press availability. So it's hard to get a good sense of where Canada-US relations are going in the longer term with Mr. Trump, partly because of the unpredictability of our political situation and the inherent unpredictability of Donald Trump.
And there's big money on the table if they play their cards right. Southworth points out there's a whopping $1 trillion to be had from sprucing up global trade practices, not to mention a juicy $2.7 trillion that could help small businesses get easier access to finance. So, while the US is busy navigating the choppy waters of tariff wars, the UK is looking to not just survive but thrive, seizing opportunities to boost trade and growth worldwide. So if you want the latest scoop on Trump and the US, stick around and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for all the updates.